Welcome back. Presidency spokesperson Vincent Magwenya joins us in studio now to talk about a whole range of issues, including the very latest social media posts by US President Donald Trump. Shall we bring up that as we welcome you, Vincent? Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Shall we bring up just a reminder of that tweet or that post on X by Donald Trump? He says South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. He said in this tweet, if we can please, gallery, bring it up again, it is a bad situation that the radical left media doesn't want so much attention or doesn't want to so much as mention. A massive human rights violation, at a minimum, is happening for all to see. The US won't stand for it, he says. We will act. Also, I will be, and he's referring to himself, Donald Trump, cutting off all future funding to South Africa until a full investigation of the situation has been completed. Vincent Magwenya, is this how presidents communicate these kinds of policy and huge global decisions on X?
Well, Michelle, we've had this experience before with President Trump during his first term in office. He has a rather different style of communicating policy decisions as well as other issues. On our part, as we've said in our statement, President Ramaphosa is looking forward to engaging President Trump, not only on this issue, but on a whole host of other issues that are of bilateral interest, as well as issues that are of mutual concern. And we believe that out of that engagement, there will be a better understanding of not only our land reform policies, but also for our position on a whole host of issues. A simple read of our Constitution will tell you that there's a provision for expropriation. And it will also tell you that provision comes with safeguards, that it must be just, it must be equitable. The act in itself, as passed and signed by the president, provides those safeguards. So we don't, in our legal framework, have any arbitrary sort of expropriation of land, let alone confiscation. We won't have the capacity to do that. Prior to Parliament passing the bill, that bill went through a public consultation process, as we are statutorily required to do so as a country. The president considered the bill and its various permutations, and he was satisfied that it meets constitutional muster. And so the sentiments that are expressed by President Trump are very much counter to what we understand as the position of our Constitution, number one, but also what we understand as the purpose of the expropriation bill. It does not target private properties, and it does not do so in an arbitrary sort of manner. And that's why we are confident that all it will take, it's a conversation and an explanation along these lines. The US in itself has, in its Fifth Amendment, a provision for expropriation of land for public usage, the same as ours. And in that provision, it balances the need for public access to land that will be used in the interest of the public, but also balancing the right of private property owners, or the rights of private property owners. And so as South Africa, we're not doing anything that's different from the US in this regard and other countries in the world. And so, as I said, we think a very simple conversation will iron out to these misunderstandings.
There is a lot of fear-mongering, though, Mr. Magwenya. There are organizations, for example, if we go back to 2018, you mentioned at the start of our conversation that this is not the first time the President, Donald Trump, has dealt with the issue of land expropriation in this way. And just as we were building up to your interview, I also reminded us of a tweet from August 2018, where he says he's asked his Secretary of State to closely study the South African land and farm seizures, expropriations, and large-scale killing of farmers. The South African government is now seizing land from white farmers. That was a tweet from Donald Trump in August of 2018. And there are organizations like AfriForum who, even back then, have welcomed Trump's announcement by the US to investigate expropriation in South Africa. They've done the same thing now.
Yeah, they've done the same thing now. I mean, we know, it's public knowledge, that you have right-wing organizations such as AfriForum who have no interest to or rather, let me say, who have no best interest for this country. AfriForum has continuously advocated against all transformative actions taken by the government to redress the ills of the past, to redress the centuries of brutal colonialism and apartheid. And AfriForum has gone around the world, quite frankly, spreading lies about the country. They've not been able to substantiate with any evidence all the claims that they've made. And it is rather unfortunate that some of those claims have landed to, some people in other areas of the world. But we are confident that we'll be able to refute those statements. We do have to, even yourselves as the media, be circumspect with how you engage with such organizations who continuously misrepresent not only the country's position, but its laws, who are fighting against our constitution. But when it suits them, when they take government to court, they rely on that same constitution on those cases. In the case of the Expropriation Bill Act, rather, you will know that there's even recourse for any aggrieved party, notwithstanding the fact that that act does not confiscate anyone's land or expropriate anyone's property. But there's recourse for anybody who seeks clarification on the constitutionality of that act. They can go to the constitutional court, and that's the beauty of our legal framework. Even parties that are not happy with that act can do so. And so such a sentiment, a position, is a little bit extreme when you consider all the safeguards that we have in our constitution. And indeed, we have to continuously call out organizations such as AfriForum because they have no best interest for the country. It is illogical for them to think you can suppress transformation that is geared towards benefiting the majority of people in this country. It is illogical for them to continue thinking that you can sustain an island of prosperity in a sea of poverty. It is completely illogical for them to believe that any act of advancing transformation as a form of redressing the ills of the past is targeted to a particular group in this country. And we must reject that kind of thinking, and we must reject the racist-based advocacy.
Well, this is why I'm circumspect when you say it's going to take a conversation with Donald Trump. Because the kinds of ideals that you've just outlined now are very much in line with the kinds of ideals that Donald Trump has in his own country and certainly towards South Africa. He's talking about this being a massive human rights violation. He's talking about the land issue being the case of treating certain classes of people very badly. Is it going to take one conversation, Mr. Magwenya?
Well, look, it can take several conversations. I think what is important is that we have different levels of engagement between ourselves and the Trump administration. As we speak, efforts are underway to get Minister Lamola talking to his U.S. counterpart over a number of issues, including this issue. We're going to engage at multiple levels. Our ambassador in Washington will also be spearheading engagements at his level with various U.S. officials. So it's going to take continuous engagement. But between the president and President Trump, it won't take that many conversations for President Trump to appreciate, one, that we are a constitutional democracy that's deeply rooted in a rule of law. Secondly, that there is no confiscation of land. Even his own embassy officials here in Pretoria will be able to give him that information. And so this is a very unfortunate case of the impact of misinformation and deliberate distortions that are peddled by right-wing parties such as AfriForum. So we are working on refuting that misinformation, and no matter how many conversations it takes, we believe that the U.S. government, particularly the Trump administration, will understand our position better.
How worried are we if indeed he does go ahead with his decision to cut all funding to South Africa? The president himself has said PEPFAR is about 17% of the funding we receive for HIV treatment, among other things. But that's tens of billions of rand, isn't it? If indeed Trump proceeds with this decision, how much of a blow will it be to South Africa, particularly in as far as AGOA is concerned?
Okay, so we shouldn't mix, and you've just done that. We shouldn't mix trade and aid. They're very two distinct, separate things. So so far as aid is concerned, as much as we've said that there's no other significant funding that we received, or aid funding that we received from the US, that's true. There isn't. There is some funding. PEPFAR has already been suspended. So prior to this announcement by President Trump, PEPFAR had already been suspended. Work is already underway to look at the necessary adjustments that we need to make to bridge the funding gap and the funding shortage that's going to result out of the suspension of PEPFAR. The other programs, you know, those programs, we can find other partners to assist us with those programs. I don't think we are entirely dependent on the United States to fund those programs. So they are not as significant as a PEPFAR, for example. Even with PEPFAR, the large bulk of that HIV/AIDS program is funded by our fiscus. Only 17% is funded by the US. And so we will be able to make the necessary adjustments and also tap into other sources of aid funding. We're not entirely dependent on the United States. I think what is important here is ensuring that we strengthen our relationship with the United States. That is important. And out of that, the other elements of the relationship can then materialize. Obviously, one will have to concede that this is not the kind of start that we anticipated to have with the Trump administration, especially following after the phone call that President Ramaphosa had with President Trump soon after he was elected. But be that as it may, we have enough in our diplomatic arsenal to engage effectively and strengthen that relationship. Not all is lost. In terms of trade, there's a very separate regime that governs bilateral trade agreements, and we shouldn't confuse that. And as far as that is concerned, there's a process that's already underway with respect to AGOA specifically. So I won't bring AGOA into this equation.
It's been a week of diplomatic fallouts for the presidency, hasn't it? Following on from what unfolded with President Cyril Ramaphosa's counterpart in Kigali, Paul Kagame, and how that unfolded. I mean, he had some strong words to say in that address, in the statement he released about responding to South Africa in any context, any day. How's the president dealing with these kinds of diplomatic issues, or is it just par for the course?
No, look, in some cases it's par for the course. What we're not in a habit of doing is getting into public spats with other heads of state. You will not see us do that. What we will do is we will issue communication and issue information so that the public knows where we stand, and we will do so in a transparent and honest manner. But what we will not do is to have public spats with other heads of states or other governments. It's not in our nature, it is not constructive, and it does not contribute to any solution that is required to whatever problem or challenge that there is. And so, yes, you can say it's been a week of diplomatic fallouts, but on our side, we don't look at it that way. We still have diplomatic relations with Rwanda. Conversations are taking place at ministerial level, and we will continue to have a relationship with Rwanda. We may occupy different points of view with respect to the challenges facing the DRC and the solution required, but that does not mean that we will stop talking to them. We'll continue talking to them.
I suppose why I'm asking the question is because, you know, you might not want to get involved in a public spat, but when certain statements are made, the likes of which Paul Kagame made to South Africa, it gets your citizens concerned. And so the people want want a response, which is what the president did.
Well, look, the president dealt with the DRC matter even on his weekly newsletter today. And I think that's really the message. The message is, as part of SADC and as part of a SADC contingency, we will remain in the DRC. We will continue to work for peace in the DRC as well as in other parts of the continent, as we've done in Mozambique, as we've done in Lesotho, as we've been doing in South Sudan. We will continue doing that work. We accept that there will be disagreements in the course of doing that work. We accept that there will be different perspectives, but we will not abandon that principle that we are part of the continent. We're not going to look away where there is instability, and we understand that instability to have a direct impact on our own stability. And so in that regard, we will stand firm in upholding that principle, in working together with multilateral organizations such as SADC, such as the AU and the UN, to ensure that we do our part in silencing the guns on the continent. And that will come with its fair share of difficulties that we understand, and we understand that in some cases emotions will be heightened, but we will stay the course and uphold those principles we've committed ourselves to.
I know I might be asking you to comment on political matters now, but Julius Malema, the EFF leader, in an address just about 12 o'clock this afternoon, has called on the president to close the Rwandan embassy in South Africa with immediate effect, given the comments of Paul Kagame, and has also called for action against Kigali in other ways if found that the soldiers that were killed in eastern DRC were indeed killed by that country.
No, Michelle, with all due respect, we can't conduct diplomacy on such complex and serious issues and then take heed of what the likes of Mr. Malema are saying. Or in all honesty, we just cannot do that. No serious administration will ever do that. That's not how you conduct diplomacy. And in diplomacy, we understand that you don't always get things your way, as I said. For as long as you are guided by principles, you stay the course. And South Africa is not acting alone here. We, as I said, we're part of SADC. SADC took a position, and we are committed to supporting that position. And so we're not going to act unilaterally, and we're not going to act in a haphazard manner. And that's not in the president's style of doing things. And so what Mr. Malema says, to be honest, with all due respect, is neither here nor there here. We're dealing with very complex matters that he may not have a full appreciation for.
And then I want to ask you, I want to start the next question by saying it's a big week for the president. But I think if you were here every Monday, we would say it's a big week for the president and for South Africa. But the State of the Nation address is happening on Thursday. And we've been doing our bit to throw back to previous SONA addresses, taking a look at some of the promises made, the kinds of things that have been done, the kind of progress that has been made. Is the president prepared for Thursday? And Vincent, in light of things like our unemployment numbers, for example, which have stayed stubbornly high, we've promised all sorts of interventions in that regard, but it doesn't seem to have stuck.
No, absolutely. The president is prepared for Thursday. More so, Michelle, you will know if there's one president who never shies away from the challenges that we are facing in this country, but also even our own mishaps in government over the years, is President Ramaphosa. And so he's not going to shy away from those challenges in explaining the progress, or rather articulating the progress, but also in then charting the way forward on how we're going to resolve those issues. We have major challenges with regards to water. We have major challenges with regards to logistics, for example, which is one of the contributors to the stagnancy of our economy, amongst others. And you can list all the challenges that you know. the president will very much address them insofar as acknowledging their existence, but more importantly, taking the country through how those challenges are going to be addressed.
With deadlines?
Well, deadlines become an issue of detail, isn't it? And that detail becomes a matter that the ministers and the respective teams that are working on those issues will deal with. Suffice to say, the president just doesn't make announcements during the State of the Nation address and then leaves the ministers to implement on their own. He remains involved. He chairs the National Crisis Logistics Committee, or NLCC, yeah. He chairs NICOM, which is a crisis committee established to address our energy challenges. As you know, he's chairing the Presidential eThekwini Working Group. He has assigned the Deputy President to look into the resolution of these water issues. And so you can be rest assured that he's going to be very much involved in driving the delivery and the resolution of these challenges.
Vincent Magwenya, it's always a pleasure having you in studio.
Thanks
for making the trip and coming in. The Presidency spokesperson talking to us of a whole range of developing stories insofar as the Expropriation Act and Trump's reading of that act and his statements on social media, the President's responses to that, and of course, as we build up to the State of the Nation address as well, which is happening this Thursday. Of course, our team will be on the ground covering that story for you.